Vacate present with a brief button.
Good morning and welcome. We begin our service with a prelude. We invite you to just absorb this without comment as we begin our service of worship.
In progress.
Welcome to worship as we continue this summer series exploring various portraits and perspectives on Jesus and the meaning of the Christ. I invite you to pause for just a moment as we also through this summer reflect on the prayer Jesus taught today on the phrase, "Your kingdom come." So just pause, find your heartbeat, wherever that might be in your body. Pay attention to your breathing. And on the inhale to yourself, say, "Your kingdom." And on the out breath, "Come." Let's just do that a number of times. Breathing in, "Your kingdom." Breathing out, "Come." May our mutual desire align with your creativity, O God. Your kingdom, come. And as we continue to be mindful of that vision, that dream, that tug for each one of us, we turn our attention to celebrations and prayer concerns. I invite those on Zoom to share in the chat what you have on your hearts, and in a moment, those in the sanctuary will invite you to do the same with a sentence or so. We're mindful of the number of folks in our congregation with COVID right now, and we ask for healing presence with them. With Chuck, who had surgery on Friday, and with Wendy, who's also recovering from surgery. With Michael and Craig. With Ann McLean. With Tim and Karen and Zachary. With Tom Everton. With Diane Fungaroli. With many nations of this globe. Japan, Ukraine, places of violence and uncertainty. Yes, Robert.
My sister lives in Tennessee, and she's having a major surgery this week. Have some type of artificial arteries put in her legs so she doesn't lose her legs. She's dealing with cancer also.
For Robert's sister anticipating surgery. Beth asks for prayers about a possible move. Cynthia.
For the needs of my family in New Orleans and my upcoming move there, August 1st.
Cynthia will be moving to New Orleans August 1st, so we tend the holy presence with her and with her entire family, with their needs. In a moment of stillness, I invite you to turn your attention to the image on the bulletin. Robert Lentz is an artist who has offered many, many different icons of contemporary saints. And this icon is called Christ of Mary Knoll. And he says, you can read about it in the back cover or the bottom of your digital bulletin, that it's intentionally unclear whether this Christ, this Jesus, is on the inside of the barbed wire or the outside of the barbed wire. Is he imprisoned as we, so many of us, through cultural institutions and personal lives? Or is he there to visit us and extend a hand, a presence, a wisdom for our release? Either way, he carries the wounds and is in solidarity with all suffering. Take just a moment to absorb that image before we pray the prayer Jesus taught in the language and tradition of our choosing. Our Father, Mother, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our sin as we forgive those who sin against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever. Amen. Our opening song is "This is the Day." Rise in body and or spirit as we sing. We are invited to share signs and gestures and words of peace with one another.
Hey, peace.
Peace, everybody.
Hey, Sarah Lou. Hey, Ann Mackey.
Hi.
Hey, Peggy Matthews.
That ain't
Well.
different.
All right. Not just
Gesundheit.
Peace.
Hi, everyone.
Peace.
Hello.
Go get a-
Adelaide.
Hey Tim, how you doing, Tim?
Hi.
Hi, Diane.
A little bit,
Hi.
a little better every day. Thank you.
Good.
Hi, Tim.
Oh, glad.
Hi.
Yeah.
Francie, how's the
Well-
hole? How's the hole in your roof, Francie?
Well, I got the adjuster coming this coming week, so that's the step
No.
forward.
I'm so sorry it happened.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. Had the grandkids last night, so I'm a little today.
Oh my gosh. Hole in
Yeah.
the roof and
And
all this
grandkids.
rain and grandkids. Oh boy.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Hope everybody's gonna have a good day today.
Yep. You too. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Looking forward to hearing Larry today.
Yeah. Oh, very good.
Yeah.
When did your hole happen?
On Tuesday night with the storms that we had a oak tree come down.
For
Yeah.
contemplative reading, we hear these words from the powerful mystic Mechthild. A fish cannot drown in water. A bird does not fall in air. In the fire of its making, gold doesn't vanish. The fire brightens. Each creature God made must live in its own true nature. How could I resist my nature that lives for oneness with God? Larry's cooked up a summer melody for us.
Every time I get up here with Diane, it's an adventure. So buckle up. Sitting in the shade, drinking bitter lemonade, 'cause that's the way God made lemons. Sitting in the shade, sipping sweet lemonade, all the better made with God's sugar. You gotta be the sugar. We gotta be the sugar. You can be the sugar. We can be the sugar. When you see your brother walking down a long dusty road, his back is bending from a heavy load, say, brother, won't you come up here and sit in the shade and have a glass sweet lemonade. You gotta be the sugar. We gotta be the sugar. You can be the sugar. We can be the sugar. We gotta be the sugar. You can be the sugar. Sister hurrying down the street, she's rushing to another job. She's just trying to make ends meet. Sister, can you take just a minute and come sit in the shade? Have a glass of sweet lemonade. We gotta be the sugar. Gotta be the sugar. We can be the sugar. We can be the sugar. sitting in the shade, drinking bitter lemonade. That's the way God made those lemons. Sitting in the shade, sipping sweet lemonade. All the better made with God's sugar. You gotta be the sugar. We gotta be the sugar. You can be the sugar. We can be the sugar.
Thanks be to God. Not corn syrup, monk fruit, stevia or truvia, saccharin or sucralose, but sugar. We can be the sugar. So it was really tricky for many weeks. I wrestled with what are the 10 or so texts that are really important, kind of centerpieces for us to wrestle with the identity and the calling forth of the Church of Jesus of Nazareth. And so I do think that Luke 6, on the end of the Sermon on the Plain, similar to the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew, is probably one of those core texts. Read with me, if you would, this one from the Common English Bible. But I say to you, who are willing to hear, love your enemies, do good to those who hate you, bless those who curse you, pray for those who mistreat you. If someone slaps you on the cheek, offer the other one as well. If someone takes your coat, don't withhold your shirt either. Give to everyone who asks, and don't demand your things back from those who take them. Treat people in the same way that you want them to treat you. If you love those who love you, why should you be commended? Even sinners love those who love them. If you do good to those who do good to you, why should you be commended? Even sinners do that. If you lend to those from whom you expect repayment, why should you be commended? Even sinners lend to sinners, expecting to be paid back in full. Instead, love your enemies, do good, and lend, expecting nothing in return. If you do, you will have a great reward. You will be acting the way children of the Most High act, for he is kind to ungrateful and wicked people. Be compassionate, just as your Father is compassionate. There's a lot in there. And this is what the Spirit is saying to the church today. Thanks be to God. I want to focus really just on that one phrase, love your enemies. And pray for those who persecute you. Do good to those who hate you. Jesus' world did not have AR-15s or drones or nuclear weapons or copycat mass murderers or originalist Supreme Court justices. And yet the wisdom teaching we find in the New Testament does have relevance for us today. I do believe that. And that's why we're here today. Jesus' hard words challenge us to be resourceful, to find resources together in response to all of the different kind of violences of our day. In today's environment, it's easy for us to be on high alert all of the time, isn't it? To be constantly on the lookout. It's not just a risk at the grocery store or for severe COVID illness. It's not just the extreme mental health challenges we see in every generation all around of us. It's not just the witnessing of dismantling of opportunity to address climate crisis, criminal justice reform, reproductive rights. It's come to a point where I think many of us fear the integrity of goodness and mercy altogether. So it's easy to walk around on high alert without taking a break. And when we step back, it's easy for us also to realize that when you are on high alert, you are an indiscriminate trigger, emotional trigger. And when we are, we lose our imagination, we lose our creativity, and frankly, we lose our ability to love. Our beliefs sort of get thrown out the window. When we are anxious, exactly what we need, we don't have access to. And so we see any kind of discomfort, any kind of disorientation we're feeling as a threat to our safety and our survival. And we react. You know, lately I've heard myself say a few times, one of the definitions of the Christ is that space in between receiving information and responding. Christ, in one way, might be the resourcefulness that we can garner in the gap between emotion and reaction. Will I lean into oneness, or will I default to safety and status quo, no matter what it is that makes me uncomfortable? Sometimes the right response is, in fact, to fight or to flee. And sometimes the right response for a follower of Jesus is to turn to wonder and to turn to love. Jesus is a wisdom teacher, the Jewish Moshel, the Aramaic Idaya, the enlightened one, who is about human transformation, a guide for us to see and to experience the world in broader ways than we do, to view the world freer from the capricious powers that hold us in bondage, to give us the power to decide a different way. The early church, you might recall, they spent a long, intensive time in preparation for baptism. And it wasn't just the ideas of Jesus as an embodiment of God's love. It was a physical, emotional, spiritual preparation. To do what? To increase the capacity to love. Not because we just by nature have the capacity to love alone, but because they were paying closer and closer attention to the presence of the Sacred One in community that strengthened their ability to respond in those ways. The Golden Rule was known in the first century when Jesus walked around Galilee. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And, of course, in the Jewish tradition, we had the negative statement of that, the Levitical statement, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. But Jesus was influenced not only by the best of his tradition, but also by a whole range of other intellectual and spiritual traditions he was coming into contact with. Just a few miles north of where he grew up, the Silk Road came through. They were bringing all kinds of different influences: Buddhism, Hinduism, Confucianism, Zoroastrianism. And he was influenced by that, such that he said, yes, this tradition that I grew up with of the Psalter and the Torah is powerful, and we're going to expand it. We're going to explode it. We're going to stretch it to its limits. The thing that's important to note here is we don't start with this radical ethic itself. Jesus always invited to begin with the imagination of the Holy One. Who is the Holy One? The Holy One does not separate good from bad, doesn't separate my team from that team. God is compassionate for all of us. And to move in the world otherwise is to heap God's rejection of who we are and all of the ways that we fall down. It's not that there isn't any judgment in this theology. It's just that judgment really is a new beginning for awareness and healing rather than the end game. So Jesus tosses out a radical new interpretation of his own tradition. Love your enemies, pray for those who persecute you. Here's a possible restatement of it. When you sense threat, you get to decide how you will respond. Often, you might respond creatively and imaginatively rather than simply in retaliation. Yet sometimes, yes, it will be necessary to do everything you can to subdue or to run away from the threat. But if that is our default, we will never get to a world of shalom. The word used in the text for enemy is one whom I hate. And sometimes the ones we hate in our nervous systems are the ones we don't know. Or the ones we're simply afraid of because we don't know, until we can begin to trust. And then there's sometimes we hate simply because this person, by being who they are, pokes at our past hurts, our past trauma, and something inside of us that we just don't want to face about who we are. Walter Wink wrote this trilogy of books some 30 years ago engaging the powers, and my copies are like just collections of little pages, binderless at this point, because I keep having to try to understand in my body what he's about. Well, he wrote, love of enemies has become the litmus test, has become the key criteria of what it means to be a Christian today. No miracle is so awesome and so necessary. That is what it means to be a Christian. Not all the self-protective, institutional propping, capitalist undergirding, divisive BS that the church has been defined as in North America today. Love of enemy. That means when we're so angry, so confused, so depressed, so lacking imagination, when we want to blow some faction of our politic out of the water in our own righteousness, we are invited back into creativity and imagination to expand the powers of our minds, to return to practices that remind us God is not on our side. Holy love coaxes us to see even the ones that we just don't want to deal with as part of the solution. I don't know. I know that's pretty tough to want to do, right? When we hurt, when we're triggered, when we just want to give up. And it's what it means to follow Jesus. So different from how Christianity has been most often defined. Walter Wink goes on in this treatment to say, enemies play a role in transforming us. We need enemies to see aspects in ourselves that we just don't see, that our friends are never going to tell us about. The unacceptable parts of us. We, he says, are dependent on our enemies for growth and transformation, to be made whole. I think we all have public figures who create a great swelling of disdain in us? Who are those people for you? I, for example, realized lately that since my 20s, and this shows what generation I'm in, since my 20s, I've had these regular dreams about Henry Kissinger. Unsettling, disruptive dreams of these confrontations I have with the former U.S. Secretary of State. So I've been spending some time with the question, what is it about the former architect of the Cold War détente that gets so under my skin? So I decided I'm going to dress up as Henry Kissinger. I'm going to make a homemade Nobel Peace Prize to hang around my neck, and I'm going to act like Henry. You smug war criminal, you. And I began to reflect on this. Perhaps it's no coincidence that he's a German American, and I wrestle constantly with what it means to have that identity in these United States. Perhaps it's because of his pragmatic intellectualism that strays into sometimes questionable means to esteemable ends. Perhaps it's a charm offensive that he had, especially with the Chinese, that is sort of a patina for passion that could actually become ruthless. So I continue to sit with these lessons from an adversary for my own shadow work. So it might be fruitful for you to take some time. Think of somebody you are having a really hard time with, or have had a history of having a hard time with. It could be a political figure, it could be somebody in the media, it could be somebody in the community. If there's a little bit of distance, it might actually be easier to do the exercise. And think of their traits. Think of the things that they say or do or just embody that irritate the heck out of you or trigger you. And then reflect on any traits or impulses you have that may have some parallel to what is so uncomfortable about them. Is there anything in the two lists that has some connection? That reaction that just comes automatically could reveal something about our own opportunities for growth and healing. In our longing for justice, in our quest for equity and peace, Jesus, the wisdom teacher, draws us into creativity and playfulness and wide-angle imagining to see our adversaries in the struggle not only as human beings, flawed with possibility as they are, but also our own vulnerable teachers whom we need for our journey to transformation. That has to be part of any strategy of change. And I think it's easy to forget that when we are so hyped up about what's going on in the world. Nonviolence without love of enemy, as Wink says, is just another arrow in the quiver of coercive force. So ours is the invitation steadily to seek to see the other as God sees them, as forgiven, redeemed, and resourceful children of God. Just a couple of announcements. Right after worship, we're going to have a discussion today whatever comes up, certainly for you to talk about, what impacted you or what you want to push against or question, but also in a backdrop, as many of us have read from Cynthia Bourdeault's book, Jesus, the Wisdom Teacher, a chapter in there of setting this context of what that means. And we'll stay on Zoom for this conversation, so those of you on Zoom can participate. This series continues the next Sunday before worship as well at 9:30. We will continue this discussion. We will be looking next Sunday at a chapter in Catherine Keller's book on being, where she talks about Jesus as the parable. So feel free to join us. There's a new stack of readings up for upcoming Sundays in the narthex, as well as a link on the announcement. So we'll be looking at Howard Thurman's Jesus and the Disinherited, a book from a Native American scholar called Jesus the Trickster, some reflection on Jesus in relationship to the Holy Spirit from quantum physics perspective, and then from John Soprano of the Liberation Theology movement around Jesus on the cross and liberator. This Thursday at 7 o'clock, we'll gather on Zoom for the first in our three-part mental health series. Sean Nelligan will be talking about strategies of addressing anxiety and stress for all of us. So join us this Thursday at 7. We continue to be working to start interviews with a church musician. If you've got any other ideas of candidates, now is the time to let the team know. Lastly, it is really our commitment, our responsibility, because we have an AED, an automatic external defibrillator in our building, to get a group of people trained in CPR and how to use AEDs. And so the time has come for us to get a new group trained. It's a 4.5-hour training on a Saturday, August 13th or August 27th. So I'm asking for those who would be interested. The church will help pay for it, if you can help us pay a little bit toward it, and you'll have this skill for wherever you go, but in particular also when we are here in this building. Our closing hymn, I've Got Peace Like a River. Rise as you are able.
I've got peace
Oh, there are many, many times when what's happening around us is a sourness that causes us to pucker and spew, makes our tongues curl. And Jesus of Nazareth, a very human one, feels all those same things and encourages beyond convention to ask the question, how can we also be the sugar? Go and adjust peace. After the postlude, we'll have discussion for those who can stay.
And may I make another quick announcement? As many of the women know, we were going to have a gathering this Friday night, and I don't think it's going to work too great at the moment, but on Thursday, you can call the Genie or the office, and we'll have a discussion. Hoping we can all get together very soon this time.
We'll stay on Zoom. Anybody